So I'm making a video to help out a friend, Mr. Ledoux. He also has a PWM Malevolent, and for some reason, Paul, the guy that invented this thing from PWM, never wrote a manual for this with a knob for function description of what this thing does, because he wants it to be everything to be like an Easter egg and sense of discovery. Then he goes and makes a dual phonic synthesizer called the Mantis. And if you have enough time to build a whole synthesizer, you can write a manual with the signal path and a knob per function on here. Okay, ran over. Let's get to the help for Mr. Ledoux. Except for one thing, they're lucky that this thing sounds so goddamn good, or else I would not be dealing with this thing. And the keyboard's kind of trash too, but let's focus on what this thing does. So Mr. Ledoux, sorry, you want to have all your FM knobs zeroed out like this, okay? All the FMs, right? So you got the shape, adjust the shape, you got your tuning, and then you got the shape mod and the shape tuning. That's important for a reason. Okay, so this is the amp section. Now, this tells you how the amp will respond. Amp 2 is tied to this LFO. So if you turn up amp 2 and turn down amp 1, it's gated to the LFO. Still keyboard tracked. Right? Turn this down, go up amp 1. Amp 1 is now gated to the keyboard. Both oscillator 1 and 2 go through envelope number 2, which is tied to amp 1. What? I'm going to say it again. VCO 1 and VCO 2 both go through envelope 2 to be going through amp 1. And I'll show you why. Or show you what I mean. When you start adjusting bringing down the decay, bringing up the attack and the sustain, the decay, sorry, bring down the sustain, you bring up the attack and decay. You get the envelope, amp envelope. Get some release going. Turn off, disengage the waveform of the oscillators, which is another reason why you might not have sound. There's just so many opportunities to not have sound come out of this thing. You got to know what it's doing. And then if we go back up to the sustain. So it does have two envelopes, and you can patch this so you just have to patch the second VCO to go into the second envelope, or else they're going to both go to the first envelope, because it is a cutout if you put in a patch cable. So back to what I was saying. What does envelope 1 do? Okay, this is where you start getting into the FM. So FM2 is AM2, so it's still going to be. So now it's frequency modulating this oscillator to the LFO because of it's both AM2 is amping the LFO, and then the FM is modulating that. So if you bring down FM2, it's going to modulate it less and less. Bring down the LFO. Technically, this would be a great dub siren, right? So you're saying like, okay, but what does FM1 do? Okay, FM1 is based on the shape mod. Because I have pulse width modulation, so it has nothing to do with the LFO. And I can even bring it up like this. You hear how the pulse width is like moving? Okay, so with these two are now also tied to amp envelope 1, and I'll show you what I mean. So as you have this thing going, as I bring up the sustain of envelope 2, you're going to hear that FM modulation start to rise higher. See, it's tied. That's the sustain of the pitch modulation. So if I add the decay, if I add attack and a decay and bring down the sustain, you're going to get a, right? Bring down the attack. Bring down the decay, bring up the sustain. Bring the release in. So that only really is affected by stuff that is affected by shape, which is Because that's what this isn't truly a sawtooth. It's like a sawtooth with a little release on it, I think. See, inherently, this whole thing, it has pulse width modulation on the entire throughout the entire structure. It's kind of what it's based for, and that's why the filter is so gosh darn good. Because that's what we're gonna really get into is this filter over here, right? So you bring up the drive, bring down the filter block. Okay, bring this down. Because once you start overdriving everything, that's whenever you start getting this. Let me just do that. Let's do a little bit of this. Nope. And of course, there's also the ARP, which I love.